Watch what's approaching, the supreme moment. Reality striking closer than it seems, don't it? Go ahead, it's for the taking if you want it. If not, the dream dies and you'll be forever haunted. Then confront it.
What's good? So I finally came around to testing this unit on the Legendary Goku event, and of course I'm referring to the free-to-play extreme strength type Cumber unit. Now he has a built-in ability to raise attack and defense as part of the super attack, and we'll cover all the other stuff here in a second. But because of the stacking mechanic this guy has, I wanted to test him out on the Legendary Goku event and see how effective this guy actually is. So as you can see, pretty much the team orientation is the time travelers category, but basically filled with a bunch of units that can stack defense. It's just going to make things a lot easier, honestly, as I'm sure a lot of you guys already know. But basically, I wanted to force this guy in onto this team and see how he actually does. I've been meaning to test this unit a lot sooner on this event, but with all the new stuff that's been happening with the holidays and everything, it just took a little while. But here we are, and let's see how he does. So with the passive skill, in addition to the ability to raise attack and defense as part of the super attack, his passive skill is Ki +2, attack and defense increase of 50%. Along with that, extreme type allies get attack and defense increase of 20% when attacking, and then super type enemies attack and defense minus 20% after receiving an attack. Additionally, launches an additional super attack after receiving an attack when the enemy attacks first. So because of all those various scenarios, I basically am going to force this guy in the first slot position as much as I can. Now, I'm not going to do it all the time because depending on the types of Goku enemies you're facing, it's not really ideal to do that, especially early on. So as much as possible, I did put him in the first slot just to make sure, he was one receiving the attack first. That way he has that, built-in ability to launch an additional super attack to further raise attack and defense on a further level. Now, with that passive I mentioned about super type enemies attack and defense minus 20%, the attack defense or attack decrease does not really apply in the latter parts of the battle, unfortunately, but at least we're able to drop the defense on a consistent basis. Along with that, the extreme type allies do get a boost of attack and defense increase of 20% when attacking, so of course I want to make sure the rotation's kept with mostly the extreme type units. Now, you're going to see situations where you're going to see units like Tech Vegito Blue and whatnot in the floater position, but for the most part, I did try to keep the Cumber unit linked up with the transforming Goku Black unit. Basically, because you do have two leaders of Goku Black, you want to keep them in each of the rotations to maximize the defense stacking ability, because that unit does have the ability to greatly raise defense, and the more you can stack, the more beneficial it honestly is. So that's pretty much the format with that. Along with that, you do have the Tech Transforming Trunks ability to raise both attack and defense as part of the super attack, so obviously again, very beneficial there. Goku Black is really meant to link up with the Transforming Goku Black. I'm speaking of the LR Goku Black, obviously, but along with that, HP recovery built in the passive does help in terms of a little bit in item consumption or whatnot, so that's pretty much the format there. Perfect Cell, I included that unit because, of course, he falls into the category, but also the ability to fully recover HP one time only once HP drops to 30%. So that's really the rough draft of, I guess, the team build. Now, the Tech Vegito Blue unit, the reason why I put him in a floater position, obviously he has the ability for potentially multiple super attacks. So because of that, he's able to raise attack and defense on a higher level than some of these other units. So because of that, I pretty much was okay with keeping that unit on the floater setup. So that's pretty much the entire build as far as the team building goes. But the real question is, if the Strength Cumber unit is actually a worthwhile unit to include. Now, as you saw in the beginning, here, it does take a little while for this guy to build up his attack and defense stats. Now, attack is definitely a little bit slower than I wanted it to be, honestly, but I think it gets high enough to where it's somewhat beneficial. Now, defense obviously is more important in this setup because toward the latter parts of the stages, like the Ultra Instinct Goku's variations of it, those enemies will hit for incredible amount, and the units will take a lot of hits. So basically, it's just a matter of a race against time, really, of how much you can stack beforehand. So, of course, like, I thought about putting Cumber in the first slot, but because it's still early on and one super attack could potentially, you know, I don't know, take at least like 100,000 in damage, it's really a little bit early for that. So of course Goku Black has a type advantage in this case, and it only makes sense to apply him there. I've given this guy level 15 additional attack and level 11 criticals, so you know, I think that more than serves the purpose of compensating for it early on. You know, potentially getting this guy to get at least 2 super attacks per rotation in an ideal situation. So with that being said, that's kind of, you know, the strategy going into it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I did speed up the video by about 20% just to make sure it doesn't drag out too long. I think the overall run itself took about 30 minutes total, so it wasn't too bad, honestly, even with that guy included. Honestly, I'm trying to think if it's even worthwhile really to include him. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, looking back on it, he definitely did help to a certain level that, you know, he brought to, I would say, more on the defensive side than attack, honestly, because his attack, and you'll see this later on, I was able to get it to about 1.1 million, which can seem a little bit lackluster, you know, given how long this battle can actually be, but at the same time, I think respectable enough because defense actually does go up to a pretty high level, and I made sure to show the defensive stats throughout the video as well. So you'll see what I'm talking about later on, and you know, probably like, you know, the second half, latter part of the video, honestly. But again, this is still early on, so we're against the Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and we're still building up the attack and defense for this guy. And I did, again, put him in harm's way as much as possible when I could. But given situations where he's in like a type disadvantage scenario or whatnot, I did kind of like be a little bit more careful about it. I don't know, like sometimes you get a sense of when those super attacks are coming, whether that's the first slot or second slot, so you kind of have to make your own judgment as to, you know, where to place a unit. But when against Ultra Instinct Goku, like when a lot of attacks are coming up, I was a little bit wary about it, I'm not gonna lie to you, but at the same time, there were certain rotations where I did place him in harm's way, even against the UI Goku, just to see how he does. But yeah, it gets a little bit tricky because all it takes is honestly one super attack and you're pretty much done for, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't say done for, but you're going to have to end up using items, and when you use items early on, it's going to make it a struggle later in the later parts. Like, my strategy going into this every time is basically to not use any items up until you get to the strength type Ultra Instinct Goku stage. If you're at that point and you haven't used any items, you're in pretty good shape. Based on my judgment of running through this several times, that's a pretty good indicator of where things stand and what your chances are of actually clearing it. So just for food for thought, that's pretty much my benchmark as to how I place my run. Basically is based on whether you had to use items up until the first part of the Ultra Instinct Goku battle or not. If you didn't, you're pretty much good to go. You have a good chance. That's probably the best way to put it. It's not guaranteed, obviously, but you have a pretty good chance of clearing it. So again, a lot of different built-in skill sets for various units. I don't really need to cover it in detail because a lot of these units, you guys pretty much know everything about it anyway, but the only issue I see with this team is Tech Vegito Blue. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to get the 12 key super attack. Basically, the links aren't as great as they could be based on, you know, the team selection. However, the saving grace with that is the fact that he has a built-in ability for potential multiple super attacks, and that, you know, it's okay basically sometimes if you don't necessarily get the first super attack. In most cases, he'll get at least one additional super where you can still stack the attack and defense at least once, you know what I mean, at the bare minimum. So in that regard, it worked out pretty well overall. And I think most of the time I planned in advance, like the rotation beforehand, to make sure there were enough key for Tech Vegito Blue to be able to get that 6 key in order to get the 12 key basically. So that's pretty much the mindset going into it. And for the most part, he did pretty decent. That's probably the best way to explain it, honestly. You definitely did have to plan for it, though, honestly. So again, we're still working through the stages and trying to get that attack and defense stats up for the free-to-play Cumber unit, and it's getting there. I think last time I checked, 800,000 in terms of attack stats. I haven't really checked what the defensive stats were at this point, but again, we took a pretty decent hit there, about 222,000, so it definitely does hurt. The LR Goku Black definitely does help because of the HP recovery skill set built into the passive. I believe it's 15%, so 15% definitely does help out a lot, because along with that, you have other units that have defense stacked up, and once you collect the specific type key for the unit, you're able to recover HP by a pretty substantial amount. So that's another way that you can conserve item usage, is recovering HP through units that raise defense throughout their continuous super attacks, basically. So we're getting pretty close to finishing up the Super Saiyan Blue stage of Goku. Now, we still have a long ways to go. This is honestly the easy part, and that after this is when things get kind of difficult. So again, as you see there, Tech Vegito Blue, I knew for a fact I wasn't able to get that super attack, so I basically shift the focus toward Cumber and Goku Black, because I need them to stack their defense as much as possible. Tech Vegito Blue, I'm banking on the fact that that unit will potentially get an additional super, and I'll at least be able to stack to a certain degree with that unit. But again, it's a game of chance, and sometimes you do have to take that risk, and you have to make a decision which one to prioritize, basically. So that's again, you got pretty lucky here with the additional super, and applies a pretty decent amount of damage, stacked attack and defense, so it all works out pretty well. And unfortunately, didn't have enough to get that additional super, or wasn't lucky enough for that, so we have pretty much another rotation. I guess it works out, because essentially what happened here is, because we extended a rotation, Trunks was able to stack another round of attack and defense, and he took very little damage there, to the point where it didn't matter if Goku super attacked or not. Okay, so again, we made it to the easier parts of the battle, is probably the best way to put it. Haven't used any items yet, so we're looking pretty good so far at this point. Now, there are a lot of attacks coming, and you can see the defensive stats are pretty good at that point, but we're going to go ahead and use an item. LR Goku Black is a tricky one, because even though you only have 2 attacks coming at the very end, that unit can take a lot of damage, and I really didn't want to take the risk of taking too much damage. So, we have items at this point, and we have a fair amount of items to use, so at this point I was okay with that. And I'm okay with Cumber. UI Goku basically dodging Cumber's attack, because as you see, it's really not that much in damage applied. But the importance really comes in where he's able to defend fairly well. Now, he took about 100,000 in damage there, even with the item usage, which was the Princess Snake. It's 70% HP recovery and 30% damage reduction. Even with that being said, he's still taking a lot of damage. So that's one of those situations where, even though I did put in my focus toward additionals, it's not quite there yet. Obviously it's nowhere close to the level of, say, transforming Trunks or even Goku Black. Now, Goku Black on the other rotation, they were pretty similar with each other in terms of defensive stats, so I guess that's a little bit of an unfair comparison, but either way, it's not anywhere close to the level of Trunks at this point, especially with the defense. But I think it's good enough to where it does add some beneficial value on bringing this unit. And at this point, it's just a matter of slowly chipping away at Goku's HP. I mean, we're not even halfway in at this point yet, and yeah, we took about 260,000 in damage, but I do have the LR cell coming up, and HP recovery should apply at this point. We get full HP recovery instead of having to use an item, and his transform state is obviously better than what it is prior to that. So, of course, along with that, you do have the ability for that ultimate attack, so that's, you know, a little bit enough to, you know, shed off some HP where you can, you know, stuff like that. So all those stuff kind of come into play a little bit. So 176,000 in defensive stats, that's actually not too bad. Considering it is a free-to-play unit, I think that's more than acceptable at that point. And then we're going to make sure the LR Perfect Cell is going to be able to get that 18 key super here and just try and maximize as much damage as possible. You know, Goku still has a pretty decent amount of HP at this point. We're not really banking on Cumber to apply too much in damage, even though he's quickly approaching 1 million at this point. But, you know, Goku Black, transforming Goku Black does have the built-in critical, so that certainly does help. My LR Perfect Cell is only at 55%, so, you know, I really don't expect a whole lot of damage applied with this unit. It's more or less, you know, the ability to recover HP and also pretty good defense. That's really what the focus was for this team anyway, was defense more so than the offensive purposes. Of course, Trunks is very beneficial in that regard because he's very good both offensively and defensively, so that really does help out quite a bit. I was hoping I would be able to reserve the Dokkan mode attack for the next battle, but based on how things are playing out, it's not going to be the case because Goku still has like two full HP bars left, and I don't think these two guys will be able to shed enough to KO the unit. And of course, you know, Goku obviously has the ability to dodge, so that makes things a little bit difficult too. But it's okay, again, because, you know, we're going to be able to stack attack and defense, whichever way you look at it. So about 200,000 roughly for the Cumber unit in terms of defense. In this setting, I thought about going with another unit to get the Dokkan mode attack, but at that point I was like, look, this is pretty much highlighting Cumber, so let's just give him the Dokkan mode attack, even though I know for a fact he's not going to be eliminating Goku right here. But I guess, you know, the caveat to that is basically at least transforming Goku Black so he can be able to, you know, greatly raise attack for one turn. You know, basically this rotation, so that'll further build up his defense going into the next battle. So in that regard, it's okay at this point, I think. And we pretty much have full HP at this point, so no matter what damage we take, you know, they're still going to recover a certain degree of defense. So as you saw there, finally got to 1 million plus in terms of attack stats. I think, you know, that's more than acceptable for this unit. Anything more than that, you're pretty much asking too much for. You know, it's at the end of the day, it's a free-to-play unit. Roughly about 200,000 in defense and 1 million in attack stats. I think that more than justifies itself. You know what I mean? Okay, so we finished up the first battle of Ultra Instinct Goku, and now we have the final battle. This is where, you know, things get a little bit tricky sometimes, so you have to be a little bit careful. But we do have a lot of units that do have good defense at this point. You know, they've stacked up defense like crazy up until this point, so I have full faith in these guys in certain rotations. I feel confident enough to where they can, you know, at least tank the attacks for the most part. So I feel pretty good about it. Even though, you know, a lot of attacks are coming up against Trunks, Trunks should be able to defend pretty well for the most part. Now, against a super attack, he might take some decent damage out of this, but like, all right, let's just find out here how much damage he takes. I mean, 175,000 is certainly a lot, but, you know, it could definitely be worse. And the fact is, like, they'll be able to defend pretty well coming up, you know, against the normal attack. So I rather have the super attack go against Trunks at this point because he does have substantially better defense than Rose does. So At that point, I think it's, it kind of played out perfectly in my opinion. Now, 178,000 roughly left in HP. How much in damage? So yeah, I mean 25,000 damage taken from Perfect Cell. So it worked out incredibly well. Because LR Goku Black is on this rotation, I ended up. This is why I brought in the Ghost Ushers, just to have that extra insurance policy, so I don't have to worry about any incoming attacks against them and whatnot. So that's pretty much one of the real reasons I brought the Ghost Usher was, in case there's a lot of attacks, even if there's only 2 attacks coming up against Goku Black, I figured, that would be the situation where I use the Ghost Ushers and, completely avoid getting hit because, again, LR Goku Black will take a pretty decent amount of hits, even with, buffs and whatnot. So you got to be definitely careful about that one. So we're using the Whis item here for 2 turns, 40% damage reduction. That's obviously going to help, even if we get supered by Goku. That's pretty much going to save a lot in HP levels. So Trunks with that 2.7 million attack stats. Hopefully a critical kicks in here. Nope. But it's all about defense at this point. That's really where the focus is anyhow. At least got a crit with Rose, so that works. And 2.5 roughly, and obviously his stats would be much higher had he not been a floater, but again, this is more or less a balanced approach where everybody's benefiting, you know what I mean? So of course Tech Vegito Blue is kind of like sacrificed or compromised a little bit in the situation, but for the greater good of the team, it's just better off to go about it that way. Alright, so 216,000 defense with Cumber, about 270,000 with Rose at this point. A lot of attacks coming up against Cell. We're going to see if we can actually tank this, but I thought about that, but I was like, let me just go ahead and use an item just in case, because there are a lot of attacks coming up, and one super on this rotation and a bunch of attacks received could quickly change the game. So in this case, against Cumber, let's see how much damage. So 86, so that obviously helped out a lot, but the question is, how much in damage will Perfect Cell end up taking here? That's really the reason why I used the Princess Stake in this case. I had a feeling they might have been able to tank it, but at this point, at this late in the game, in this run, it's really not worth it. Might as well use the item. If you feel comfortable enough to where you have enough left over to where you can finish off Goku, I think you're better off just using the item, honestly. It's about 800,000 in damage, so obviously it does help to a certain level. I mean, at the end of the day, 800,000 in damage is still 800,000, so every little bit counts in this case, and you just pretty much have to slowly chip away. Again, LR Goku Black is on the rotation here, so I wanted to make sure no attacks are received and we can just kind of chill and, whatever. So that's pretty much, again, avoid any incoming attacks against LR Goku Black. Just go ahead and use that Ghost Usher. Whatever items remain, we'll reserve that for the important, crucial stages of it. But at this point in the run, I still felt pretty good about it because I felt like I still had a decent amount of items left over. And I feel like at that point, I didn't really think I would end up using all of them. Obviously anything can change in a hot minute, but it's really what the mentality was. I mean, if you look at it, a little less than 3 HP bars left, and you're pretty close to finishing things up. Everybody has a decent level of defense. In this case, because of a lot of attacks are coming up against Tech Vegito Blue here, because I didn't want to break the rotation between Cumber and Rose, we went ahead and used the Android 8 item here. It's 70% HP recovery, and then 50% was it 50% defense increase or damage reduction? I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure it was defense increase of 50%. By the way, when I was referring to the Princess Snake item, it's not 70% HP recovery. It's actually 55% HP recovery and then 30% damage reduction. So I don't know if you already corrected me in the comment section, but just wanted to clarify that one. Alright, so pretty close here. We might actually be able to finish this one. Yeah, definitely took some decent hits here, but not enough to really worry about. So I guess in that sense, we didn't really need to use that item in that situation. But again, we have items available. Might as well use it. And honestly, I knew for a fact we were going to clear it at this point, so I wasn't really worried at all. If Trunks is able to get a crit and Goku doesn't dodge, I mean, that's pretty much a wrap at that point. But we got Goku Black, or Rose in this case, where defense is really good and the attack output is pretty decent as well. And as the last insurance policy, we have LR Perfect Cell that can more than probably apply enough damage to finish the deal. That is if Goku doesn't dodge. But with very HP left, I think we're good. Yeah, so that's pretty much the run with the free-to-play Extreme Strength type Cumber unit at 100% potential. Pretty much seeing how he does on the Legendary Goku event. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.